The topic of my report is microservice component testing using AWS services emulation. First of all, a couple of words about me. My name is Maksim. I'm QA automation engineer, specialized in all types of backend testing, component integration end-to-end. I'm also experienced in testing systems with distributed microservice architecture, with Apache Flink, Spring Boot, and so on, integrated with more than 20 Amazon Web Services. We will briefly touch on the features of component testing of microservices, take a look at helpful tools like Testcontainers and LocalStack, and see in practice how to apply them to solve the problem of component testing of microservice integrated with AWS. Let's specify some component test features. First of all is provide installation. Also, we need to make sure the service is able to correctly receive data from the input source, process it, and transfer it along the chain to another service or services via established communication channel like Kafka, some Amazon service, database, and so on. And finally, we have not to use the real environment, as this leads to an excessive load on the infrastructure, increases the cost of testing, and violates isolation. Actually, we are not testing the environment, but the component in this case. The solution is Testcontainers. Testcontainers is a library that allows you to write tests on different languages, using real dependencies in Docker containers. With this tool, we can create a network of dependent services at runtime connected to the microservice we are going to test. You can connect everything that can be packed into a container: database, message broker, WebDriver, and much more. In this report, we will consider the emulation of Amazon Web Services, and another tool will help us with this is LocalStack. LocalStack is a project that provides an easy way to develop and test AWS cloud applications directly from your local host. It runs a test environment that provides almost the same features and APIs as the actual AWS cloud environment. LocalStack has several editions, and as you can see, the free version supports an extensive list of services. Now let's take a look at some implementation details. To demonstrate, I've prepared a simple Spring Boot microservice and covered its functionality with component test. Here is the link to my public GitHub repo, so feel free to use this project as an example if needed. Let's go to the code. Hope you can see it. Please,
Yep.
Please confirm. Thank you. So this is Gradle project with two packages: main, which contains service itself, and test with component test. First of all, yes, this is Spring Boot application. And first of all, we have SQS events controller. This controller polls input SQS queue and trying to receive messages. Then it deletes message from the input queue and performs some transformation. Actually, it's just adding some postfix to the input message body. And finally, it deletes message from the input queue. I mentioned already. Sorry. Finally, it sends message to another queue. So we have two queues: input and output. SQS service class is used to specify queues, input and output. These queues service receives these queues from application YAML file. Also, it used to set up AWS SQS client from SDK, and also it has some methods to interact with SQS, like deleting, receiving, and sending messages. And finally, we have AWS config class. This configuration class is used for creating SQS client bin to establish connection to the real AWS service. So here we have region, profile, and this is actual AWS profiles. Okay. Now let's take a look to the component test. First of all, I should mention that this test is marked with active profiles annotation with component test value. This line should say Spring Boot to use separate application YAML file. Here it is, with updated queues names. This is our testing queues names and some custom parameters. And the other important thing is that we can manage configuration using this profile. First of all, this SQS client from main package that is related to microservice will not be used in the component test as it marked with profile annotation with not component test value. Instead of this, Spring will create another one bin from test config configuration class. Let's dive deeper and take a look bins Spring Boot will create here. LocalStack container will create and start Docker container with emulated AWS service. We can provide an array of services we want to emulate, but in this example, we have only SQS. And actually, yes, here we can see a list of available AWS services for emulation. By the way, this is free version of LocalStack. Next, we have credentials provider bin. It's used for AWS services connection, and as you can see, it uses access key and secret key directly from LocalStack container. Next is SQS client bin. This bin is used in the test and service itself. To make it work, we need to override endpoint. This is very important line since we need to say client use some custom endpoint, not to try connect to real AWS environment. So here we have SQS, but if we need to create another beans, for example, S3, SSN, and so on, we just need to use another variable from enum, another constant. Okay, and the last one bean is SQS manager. This class is used for test purpose only, and it contains some methods for interacting with queues. Actually, this class can be moved to the QA framework in order to reuse it in the other tests. Test itself is pretty simple. It just sends message to the input queue, waits until message appears in the output queue, and checks that message was updated. So here is modification postfix I mentioned before. And finally, test checks message was removed from the input queue. Let's now try to run test in debug mode. Here is my Docker desktop, and we have to wait a little bit until containers will up. Great. So as you can see, a couple of containers were run. First one is core test containers container, and second one is a container with emulated AWS service. Let's resume test. As you can see, it was passed, and now all containers will be terminated automatically. Yes, here it is. So, as the conclusion, I would say that component testing of microservices interacting with AWS may have a number of difficulties, but using powerful tools like Testcontainers and LocalStack will significantly help us to test and any distributed systems with complex logic. Okay, I believe that's it from my side. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask me.
Thank you so much. Please feel free to put your questions into the meeting chat, or if it's comfortable to you, please unmute yourself. Let's probably wait for a few seconds more.
Yes, sure.
I'm sorry, could you drop the link to the test project to the chat just to play with
Yes,
the
sure.
project a bit?
Also, I believe we will be able to share my presentation. It also contains link, but yes, I'll drop link to the chat.
And maybe to be interesting to others to learn a little bit about my question that I asked about sending huge files and huge amount of files, and would it be possible to test if everything is okay using your way of testing?
Well, about huge file, I'm not sure as I never faced with this, but about large amount, there is one important thing about AWS SDK. So let's take a look, read message. Yes. So this method allows us to receive list of messages, but up to 10. So one request will return only 10, maximum 10 messages. Less, okay, but not more than 10. This is according to AWS documentation. But if we need to pull more than 10 messages, we just need to call this method several times. So each time it will return new messages from the queue.
Thank you.
So we can implement some kind of collector or something like that if we need to receive more than 10 messages. Also, in this case, we have to set up visibility timeout. Actually, I don't remember which is the default value, but visibility timeout means that, for example, if we set 10 here, this is seconds. Integer value, it's seconds. If we set 10, in this case, this method will not return anything until this timeout will pass. So if we want to poll queue, for example, each second to collect a lot of messages from the queue, we need to set minimum timeout to reach out our goals.
Thank you. Thank you for answering the question. Probably anyone has another question in mind?
Can I ask again?
Sure.
Could you share a bit information about real bugs that you managed to catch using your tests? Just to be aware what we can monitor using this approach. Interesting cases, I mean, some interesting cases.
Well, actually, it's a rather difficult question. Okay, let me think a bit. I'll add this point to my presentation. Is that okay for you? Because
Okay, no
I
problem.
should collect data in my mind.
Because it's just interesting, yeah, how useful this approach was for your project. How many bugs you managed to analyze?
Okay, I got your question. Just need some time to collect data.
As Maxim mentioned before, we will add the presentation to the talk page along with this recording, and we will also send notification when recording and also presentation is uploaded to the page so that you can reach out it really easy. The presentation can be downloaded and the video can be just watched directly at the platform or at the community YouTube channel as well. Okay, do we have any other questions? Well, it seems like no. Then thank you so much for joining us today. The session was shorter than we planned, but I hope it will work for you. Thanks a lot to Maxim for delivering this interesting presentation. And we will also send you a feedback form within an hour. Please feel free to add your comments and about this meetup so that we can make the next ones interesting to you. Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Thank you.